Hey, good morning and welcome to Real Estate News. I'm your host, Jack Gately. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Goldman Sachs is predicting that home sales will annualize in 2024 at 3.8 million homes. 3.8 million homes. And they're actually also predicting a dip in the price of homes, according to the Shiller index, this fall, this November, December, and January. They're expecting actually to see declines before prices rebound in 2024. So this is a really interesting situation because just recently we dipped below 4 million in annualized sales, and Goldman Sachs is now calling for 3.8 on an annualized number for next year. And that, begs the question, if you're an agent in this marketplace, how are you going to survive? I'm really interested to see if some of you out there are seeing people leave the business because there's just not enough volume. I think that certainly the easy pickings of just picking up a sale, like just because you're there, are over, right? The low hanging fruit is over, and listings are tougher to come by. Oh, we did close a sale on Friday, which was a big one, which is great. And the check arrived yesterday. That was very nice. But it's over there. But going forward for 2024, we're not looking at a huge run up in transactions. So combine that with the potential situation with the commission changes that may or may not happen. You got to ask yourself, like, how am I going to make money in 2024 and 2025 if we're in a low volume environment? Regardless of price, we're probably looking at a low volume environment. Here is existing home sales charted. I'm going to just slide this up just a teeny bit. Here we go. Here. Oh, my picture's in the way. Let me go. That's a little bit better. Over the last 12 months, you can see in the inset there, we've slid down to 3.96, which is the number that just came out. We were previously at 4. And if you look, somewhere in the middle, 5-ish, 5.5 is kind of normal. And now we're going to be under 4 probably for a while, or, around that 4 number. So that's a huge hit in total number of volume of transactions. What someone do the math for me there. If we were at 5.5 and we're now at 4, what's that? That's like a 30% volume cut or something like that. Somebody check my math. So what are you going to do if you're an agent out there and we're looking at a situation where not only are we looking at volume going down, but we're also probably coming into a recession? And if you look at housing starts by category, thank you, Resi Club, for this chart. When you look at housing starts by category, we've seen very recently a strong dip in housing starts. And if you look at this chart, housing starts are usually a leading indicator going into a recession, which is crystal clear. You saw housing starts start to tumble in about 2006. And if you look back at this chart, they almost always dip going into recession. So if you're a rank and file agent and you're looking at a recession, you're looking at potential commission changes, you're looking at a situation where the total volume of sales is probably going to be lower than it was before, what are you going to do? Well, the first question you probably should ask is, what are you doing now to get business? And I'm going to guess that, and I'm really interested in your comments, by the way, if anyone adds it, I'm going to guess that most of you are advertising or something like that. But, I was just thinking to myself, and you tell me if I'm wrong. I think a lot of people out there that are either advertising, that's great if they're out there advertising. But remember, advertising doesn't build upon itself. It's not a cumulative thing. It's like paying rent. In a way, it is paying rent, right? And as soon as you turn off the advertising, the leads shut off, right? So if you're on Zillow right now spending X dollars a month on Zillow, if you stop that because you don't have enough transactions coming in, because overall the economy is the number of transactions is down. If you stop that, what are you left with? Right? If you have a cash flow problem and you say, you know what, we gotta cut back on our Zillow or whatever billboard or whatever you're advertising, what are you going to do then? Because when you're advertising, you're on a treadmill of continually having to re-advertise. And once again, it is not cumulative. It does not build a brand. Additionally, as we talked about with the lawsuits out there, if you're marketing to buyers, that's going to be a risky proposition because buyer commissions may or may not go away, but they certainly seem like they might be in jeopardy. So if your whole marketing situation is towards buyers, you're in a kind of a tricky strategic position here. I'm going to pick on this YouTube channel only because I'm a big fan of this YouTube channel. But they're specifically targeted towards buyers, called Moving to Memphis. I've been to Memphis twice, so obviously I'm an expert. I really, really enjoyed my visit. My 2 visits to Memphis, had a great time. But this is a channel that they do really well. They got 1,500 subscribers, 73 videos. They're very good videos and very well put together. These guys they've got an excellent YouTube game, but it's all targeted towards buyers. This is the best place to find information about moving to Memphis. It's all targeted towards buyers. You might want to think about reconsidering that. But I like the play from a general perspective is that they are not counting on advertising. I don't know what else they're doing, but at least this strategy here was to build a brand on YouTube about moving to Memphis. I like that strategy from a brand building perspective. I just think they probably want to tweak it to be more seller focused, but they're in the right direction. For you folks out there that are agents and that you're only building a brand, so to speak, by advertising, you've got to change that shit around. You've got to start to create your own content, because when we're looking at a situation where we're going to have low volume for the foreseeable future, a recession in sometime in the foreseeable future, that might interrupt your cash flow so that you might have to cut back on your advertising. What do you have left? And if you're not creating a content brand for yourself, you don't have anything left. So I like this channel. I would just think that they would be better served if they started to think about tweaking it to be more seller focused. But I love that they're out there creating content. And I think that's what you need to do. If you're a rank and file agent, you've got to go out there and create that content for yourself. Once again, it doesn't have to be video. It doesn't have to be a live stream. It can be written contract, get on Substack. It could be written content, get on Substack. Substack's a email collection machine, or do a podcast or something. But you've got to start to build your brand based upon content, right? Because just advertising is not going to be forever. Just because, given the current economy. Look at what I'm doing here. This is basic. Why am I doing this live stream? More or less to promote the real estate school. I have a lot of competitors that spend a boatload of money advertising on Facebook, on the internet, whatever. And that's good for them. Good for them. They do that. But the second they have to stop that because the economy takes a dinger, guess what? My brand of being on the internet, I can still do this, right? So I can still go live every morning at 8:30. They can't. Not that they don't have the technology. They don't have the talent. Not that this takes a lot of talent, but part of being able to do this is actually just doing it. But a lot of them could. There's probably 2 or 3 that probably could. But when you build a brand on the internet, it really doesn't matter whether the economy's hot or cold. So something to think about. I hope that you really spend some time thinking about what your plan is for 2024 if you're an agent in a low volume market with a recession potentially on the horizon. So, getting back to the Stitzer case out in Kansas City, you've heard me say already that I don't think that this is super important anymore because the principle of requiring cooperating coercion, they've already caved on that. We've covered that. And the only thing that really matters is whether the NAR is going to have to pay a boatload of money and whether these other defendants are going to have to pay a boatload of money. So yesterday, thank you to Inman for bringing this update yesterday afternoon. There was something that I thought was very interesting in the Inman summary of what occurred yesterday. So the plaintiff's attorney expected to question Bob Goldberg today and will most likely seize on portions of Monday's testimony from former NAR president Sharon Millett from the 1990s. She was the president back then, around the cooperative compensation rule. Among the points made by Millett on Monday, as devised by the Presidential Advisory Group Commission in the early 1990s, has no bearing on whether listing owner brokers compensate buyer's brokers. According to a summary provided by NAR, Millett contended that compensation would be offered regardless of the rule. It's the best way to ensure a property gets seen. So the way I read that is, first off, it's an affirmation of what the Consumer Federation of America has said and the Department of Justice has said, in that making the rule optional has no actual market impact. Making the rule optional has no market impact, as Consumer Federation of America showed when they tested the before and after out at the Northwest MLS out in Washington State or Oregon or wherever it happens to be. Out there, which I'm sure it's lovely. I just don't know exactly. I think it's Washington State. You can fact check me on that. But it's kind of an admission that making it optional doesn't matter, which I believe adds fuel to the fire for when the Department of Justice, if the Department of Justice steps in and says, hey, we want to ban the seller paying the commission at all because effectively we know it doesn't make any difference. This comment also from former President Sharon Millett from the 1990s also seems to admit that agents will steer clients to properties that are offering commission and will steer them away from properties that do not offer commission. And steering seems to be a huge issue, kind of like not getting a lot of attention here. So I really think if we go to an optional system rather than a complete ban, which I do think is what the Department of Justice / the Biden administration wants, but if we go to an optional system, it would be very much like the same thing that I dealt with when I rented apartments in Boston. When I started off my career in real estate in 2011, the way we talked about it was there's always a fee. It just depends who pays the fee. Sometimes the landlord pays the fee. Sometimes the tenant pays the fee. It's going to depend upon market conditions. And we would have a required rental fee disclosure, which is also effectively a contract, more or less, that says if we find you an apartment, we're going to try to get the landlord to pay. But if the landlord doesn't pay, you're going to pay. Kind of like a success fee, a buyer representation agreement, of sorts, / disclosure. So sometimes, depending upon market conditions, you could get the landlord to pay, but predominantly the tenant paid in the Boston rental market. I know for some of you watching across the country, you might, the landlord paid the fee? Yeah, in Boston, that was the market conditions. I know that many other places across the country, you'll be like, that's unheard of. Yeah, it is unheard of in a lot of places, but in some college towns, it's actually quite common. And Boston's a huge college town, right? And so if we go to an optional system, I can see this kind of going back and forth based upon whether it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. And that can be confusing for clients because, they could have sold a house 1 year and then, 2-3 years later are involved in a different transaction in a different time and place. And now they didn't have to pay the fee before, but now they have to pay the fee, and now they're outraged, right? I could totally see how that would happen. Especially, I experienced that a lot renting apartments in Boston because having the tenant pay the fee is unusual from a nationwide perspective. And I would have mostly parents because they were mostly paying for their college kids to rent apartments in Boston. And they were outraged that the tenant would have to pay the fee. That's why we always got their signature before we actually took them out to see apartments. They were outraged that the tenant would have to pay the fee because it was unheard of. I remember it was particularly one set of parents from Boca Raton. They were like, that's illegal. No, you didn't tell us. And then, I faxed them over because back then we had fax machines. The signed rental fee disclosure. And you're like, okay. So it's a much more confusing system. And I think in a way, it's a moving target, which makes consumers antsy. It's a much cleaner system if you actually ban the seller from paying the commission, because then there's you absolutely know who's paying the commission. It's easy. Seller pays the seller agent, buyer pays the buyer agent if there is a buyer agent. Which gets me back to how are you going to market as an agent if there's a buyer's agent? Remember, there's always going to be a seller's agent. There's always going to be somebody that lists the property. But there might not always be a buyer's agent. So once again, if you're marketing towards buyers, I just think that's really risky, on a going forward basis. So yesterday, as part of the court case, one of the defendants, Home Services of America, they're like the Berkshire Hathaway thing, right? I'm pretty sure that's who they are, filed documents requesting a summary judgment. And I think this is kind of like a routine thing. Why wouldn't you do that? Of course you would. You're like, hey, let's just give it a shot. All you have to do is file the paperwork. The plaintiffs have not submitted any kind of evidence, neither direct nor circumstantial, that Home Services defendant entered into any kind of agreement with anyone related to the conduct being challenged in this case. I think you would see this strategy first before you get any potential settlement mid-trial, right? So why settle mid-trial before you at least ask the judge to dismiss the whole thing? So if this gets shot down, and the judge did not rule on the motion right now, but if this gets shot down, then you would think the next domino to fall would be some type of settlement. You tell me. But that's what's going on in that case for now. I thought today was case Shiller, but I guess it's next Tuesday. So my mistake. I think I blurted out that today was case Shiller. That's next Tuesday, Halloween, spooky. And hopefully it won't be a scary number next Tuesday. But that is next Tuesday, which brings us to home sales tomorrow, 10 a.m. And then Thursday, we have GDP. That'll be an interesting number. Pending home sales also on Thursday, with the big numbers coming in, personal income, PCE index. That is all Friday. I think I told you that case Shiller was today, but I believe it's on next Tuesday, the 31st. This is the case. I was all fired up to talk about case Shiller today. And here is the chart, right? Look at that appreciation starting at about 2012. Just on a tear, and then even steeper. When you look at this chart, did something there. Sorry about that. When you look at that chart, is there something about that says bubble to you? because there's something on that says bubble to me, right? I don't know. You tell me. When you look at this Case-Shiller chart, which is the study of the 20 biggest markets, and it's not really a micro tool. The strength of the Case-Shiller is that it's a macro tool, and they've been keeping it for so long. I mean, this chart goes back until the late 80s. But when you look at this chart, does it say to you potential correction? Because that's what it says to me. Yeah, that's what it says to me. U.S. Treasuries. Let's talk about U.S. Treasuries. At 4.85. Now, there was some controversy yesterday because this number is down a little bit, and mortgage rates actually fell, I think, to 7.91 in yesterday's Mortgage News Daily survey. There was some controversy because Bill Ackman, the trust fund, hedge fund guy, he had placed a short against Treasuries, which basically means that he was expecting the number to go up, which it did. And now he has covered his short, saying there's too much risk in the world to bet against the bonds. In other words, he thinks with the war in Ukraine, the war in Israel, that effectively people will move to a flight of safety, and he thinks people are actually going to buy bonds, which makes the yield go down. So he has now covered his short after making probably a lot of money. And there was a significant amount of social media criticism that, in a way, he manipulated the market. That's probably true, allegedly. But that's why, at the very least, we've seen a dip down. If you look at this dip down yesterday, because over the last couple of days, because effectively he has covered his short, and now he's saying that the yields will go down, which would effectively mean that probably interest rates will go down. But very interesting that he kind of market manipulated a little bit there. All right, so that is the wrap for today. We'll bring more news to you as it comes. I'm Jack Gately from Jack Gately Real Estate, broadcasting to you from beautiful Plymouth. Have a great day. Go make some money. Bye-bye.